Have you ever stood at the edge of a decision, heart pounding, unsure of the path ahead? What if the very thing you held most dear was threatened? In the tapestry of life, threads of uncertainty often weave unexpected patterns. Today, let's journey back to ancient Egypt, to a time when a mother's courageous act set the stage for one of history's greatest deliverances. Let's explore how God, the ultimate architect, orchestrates destiny in ways we can't fathom. Elohim, the architect of destiny, a journey of faith and providence in the story of Moses. The sun cast its relentless glare over the sands of Egypt, where the Hebrews toiled under the weight of oppression. Day after day, brick after brick, their lives were bound by the chains of slavery. Families clung to whispers of ancient promises, tales of a God who had not forgotten them. In the midst of this hardship lived Amram and Jochebed, a humble couple from the tribe of Levi. Their days were filled with back-breaking labor, yet their hearts held a flicker of hope. They nurtured their two children, Miriam and Aaron, teaching them about the God of their ancestors. Nights were spent under the stars, sharing stories of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But shadows loomed larger as Pharaoh's fear grew with the Hebrews' numbers. Can you imagine the dread that settled over the community when the decree was announced? Every Hebrew boy that is born must be thrown into the Nile, Exodus 1:22. The command was absolute, merciless. The wails of grieving mothers echoed through the narrow streets. Jochebed felt a knot tighten in her stomach. A silent prayer rose from her lips. Life under such edicts was a delicate dance between survival and faith. The ordinary had become a landscape of fear. Every knock at the door could mean soldiers searching for infants. Yet, even in this bleakness, love found a way to blossom. It was into this world that a new life was about to enter, unaware of the destiny that awaited. Isn't it remarkable how the darkest nights often precede the brightest dawns? In a time when hope seemed lost, a divine plan was unfolding. God was at work, even when his hand was unseen. The Hebrews could not see it, but the architect was drafting a new chapter. As days turned into weeks, the weight of Pharaoh's decree pressed heavily. But amidst the despair, there was an undercurrent of anticipation. Something was about to change. Hearts were being prepared for a breakthrough, even if they didn't know it yet. Perhaps you felt that tension, the sense that circumstances are insurmountable, yet a whisper of hope persists. The Hebrews were on the cusp of a journey that would redefine their identity, and it all began with the birth of a child. In the hush of a starlit night, Jochebed felt the familiar pangs of labor. Surrounded by the quiet support of Miriam and the steady presence of Amram, she brought forth a son. His first cry pierced the silence, a sound both joyful and terrifying. How could such a precious life be marked for death? Holding him close, Jochebed marveled at his perfection. "He is a fine child," she whispered, Exodus 2:2. But fear quickly shadowed her joy. The decree loomed like a dark cloud. What could they do? How could they protect this innocent life in a world determined to destroy it? Have you ever faced a situation where the stakes were so high that the options seemed non-existent? The call to adventure often arrives uninvited, demanding courage we didn't know we possessed. For Jochebed, the call was clear: save her son, no matter the cost. The family devised a plan to hide the baby. For 3 months, they shielded him from prying eyes. Every coo and cry was muffled, every visitor a potential threat. Miriam stood guard, ever watchful. Their home became a sanctuary and a prison all at once. But as the child grew, so did the risk. The walls seemed to close in, and the fear of discovery intensified. They knew they couldn't hide him forever. The call to adventure was no longer just about survival. It was about trusting in something greater than themselves. What would you do when faced with the impossible? Jochebed's faith was being tested beyond measure. It was time to step into the unknown, to release control and place her son into the hands of God. The adventure was just beginning, and there was no turning back. In moments like these, faith transcends logic. Hebrews 11:23 later commends their faith. By faith, Moses' parents hid him for 3 months after he was born, because they saw he was no ordinary child. Their actions were a testament to a trust that defied reason. The decision weighed heavily, but there was a glimmer of hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, God had a plan amidst this chaos. The seed of destiny was planted, and it was time to let it grow. Yet even as the plan formed, doubt gnawed at Jochebed's heart. Could she really surrender her son to the unknown waters of the Nile? The very thought was agonizing. Every maternal instinct screamed to hold him tighter, to protect him at all costs. Have you ever wrestled with letting go of something precious? The refusal of the call is a natural response to fear. Jochebed pondered every possible alternative. Was there another way? Could they flee, hide better? But reality was unforgiving. The walls were closing in. Neighbors were whispering. The soldiers' patrols grew more frequent. Each day brought new risks. The family's safety hung by a thread. Holding on was no longer an option. It was a path to certain doom. Amram offered gentle reassurance. "We must trust Yahweh," he said softly. But trust can be the hardest when the stakes are highest. The internal battle raged within Jochebed. To act meant potential loss. To not act guaranteed it. Isn't it often the case that our greatest acts of faith require the greatest sacrifices? The crossroads of decision can paralyze us, but sometimes surrender is the gateway to miracles. Jochebed's hesitation was understandable, human, relatable. The moment came when she knew she had to choose. Clinging to her son could lead to his death. Letting him go was his only chance at life. It was a paradox that tore at her soul. She wept bitter tears, wrestling with the inevitable. In our lives, we too face moments where holding on hinders growth. Jesus said, "Whoever finds their life will lose it, and whoever loses their life for my sake will find it." Matthew 10:39. Letting go can be the ultimate act of trust. Finally, with a heavy heart but resolute spirit, Jochebed embraced the call. The refusal melted into acceptance. It was time to act, to release her son into the care of the one who holds the universe. In the quiet hours before dawn, Jochebed sought solace in prayer. Kneeling on the rough floor, she poured out her heart to God. "Yahweh, guide me, protect my son, give me wisdom." Her faith became her mentor, a beacon in the darkness. Have you ever found guidance in the stillness, when the world is asleep, but your soul is awake? Jochebed listened for that still, small voice. And in that sacred space, a plan began to form. A daring, unimaginable plan. She would place her baby in a basket and set him afloat on the Nile. The very river meant for his demise would become his path to salvation. It was audacious, but it was inspired. The design of the basket was critical. It had to withstand the waters. With care, she and Miriam wove reeds, sealing the basket with tar and pitch. Each stroke was an act of love, each weave a prayer. The mentor of faith whispered, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding." Proverbs 3:5. Amram stood by, providing silent strength. The family united in purpose. Their collective faith became a fortress against the fears that loomed. They weren't alone. The architect was guiding their steps. Isn't it profound how divine wisdom often comes in the simplest forms? There was no grand revelation, no angelic visitation, just a mother's intuition shaped by trust in God. The mentor didn't appear as a person, but as faith itself. The plan was set, but execution required courage beyond measure. Jochebed held her son close one last time, imprinting his face upon her heart. "The Lord is your keeper," she whispered. Psalm 121:5. With the mentor of faith guiding them, they were ready to step into the unknown. The journey was no longer theirs alone. It was part of a grander design. The morning sun cast a golden hue over the Nile's waters. With trembling hands, Jochebed placed her precious child into the basket. The river that represented death now symbolized hope. The threshold was crossed. There was no turning back. Can you feel the weight of that moment? The air thick with emotion, the silent prayers ascending like incense. Miriam stood nearby, eyes wide with a mix of fear and determination. The current gently took the basket, and the journey began. The river's whisper seemed to echo God's promises. "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord." Jeremiah 29:11. Yet uncertainty hovered. What lay ahead? Predators? Discovery? The unknown stretched out like the river itself. Jochebed watched until the basket drifted out of sight. Her heart ached, yet there was a peace that surpassed understanding. She had done all she could. Now, it was in God's hands. The crossing of the threshold was complete. Miriam, ever resourceful, followed along the riverbank. Her small figure moved stealthily among the reeds. Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's a quiet step forward. Isn't it amazing how God uses the least likely among us to fulfill his purposes? The young girl became a key player in this divine drama. The threshold wasn't just physical, it was a passage into faith in action. The basket floated onward, carried by currents both natural and supernatural. Every ripple was a note in the symphony God was composing. The journey had begun, orchestrated by the architect of destiny. As the distance grew, so did the anticipation. What would happen next? The story was unfolding, each moment a brushstroke on the canvas of God's masterpiece. The Nile teemed with unseen dangers, crocodiles lurking beneath, swift currents ready to overturn. Yet the basket remained steady. Was it mere coincidence, or was a divine hand guiding it? Miriam kept pace, her eyes never leaving her brother. Have you ever wondered how many unseen battles God fights on our behalf? The trials we are unaware of, the perils diverted without our knowledge. The basket's journey was a testament to God's protective embrace. As the sun climbed higher, the basket drifted toward a secluded spot where women gathered. Among them was an unlikely figure, the daughter of Pharaoh, an enemy by lineage, but perhaps an ally by divine appointment. The tension mounted. Miriam's heart raced. What if the princess discovered the baby's heritage? The decree was clear: Hebrew boys were to be killed. Yet something urged her to stay and watch. Could this be part of God's plan? The princess noticed the basket among the reeds. "Fetch it for me," she commanded. Her servants complied, and as she opened it, the baby's cry pierced the air. Compassion welled within her. This is one of the Hebrew babies, she recognized. Exodus 2:6. Isn't it ironic how God can turn hearts even among those we perceive as enemies? The princess's empathy became a lifeline. The test was unfolding, and unexpected allies emerged. The lines between enemy and friend blurred under God's orchestration. Miriam seized the moment. Summoning courage, she approached the princess. "Shall I go and get one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you?" she offered. A simple question, laden with hope. The princess agreed. Doors were opening. In the midst of trials, God provides not just protection, but also opportunity. Allies appear in forms we might never anticipate. The journey was taking a remarkable turn, guided by unseen hands. Miriam raced back to her mother, joy illuminating her face. "Come quickly. The princess wants you to nurse the baby," she exclaimed. Jochebed's heart soared. Could it be true? The very child she released was being returned to her arms. Have you experienced moments when a situation seems to come full circle in the most unexpected ways? The inmost cave, a place of deepest fear, was transforming into a sanctuary of hope. God's fingerprints were evident. Returning to the riverbank, Jochebed approached the princess with humility. "Take this baby and nurse him for me," the princess said, "and I will pay you." Exodus 2:9. Not only was her son restored, but she would be compensated. Blessings multiplied. The layers of God's provision unfolded like petals of a flower. From potential loss to abundant restoration, the journey delved into the depths of God's faithfulness. The inmost cave was not a place of despair, but of revelation. Isn't it just like God to exceed our expectations? Now to Him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine. Ephesians 3:20. Jochebed's act of surrender opened the door to blessings she couldn't have envisioned. Back at home, the family rejoiced. The baby was safe, their bonds stronger than ever. But they knew this season was temporary. One day, she would have to release him again. The inmost cave still held shadows of future challenges. Yet for now, there was gratitude. Each day was a gift, each moment cherished. The journey inward brought them closer to God and to each other. Faith had been rewarded, but the story was far from over. The approach to the inmost cave had revealed treasures of trust and provision. The path ahead would require continued faith, but they were fortified by this profound experience. Years passed, and the time came when Jochebed knew she must fulfill her promise. With a heavy heart, she prepared to bring her son to the palace. The ordeal loomed, a final act of surrender. How do you let go of what you love most? Not once, but twice. Moses, now a young boy, was unaware of the weight of this moment. Jochebed held his hand tightly as they approached the grand structures of Egypt. Each step was a blend of pride and sorrow. The sacrifice was immense. The palace gates opened, and the princess greeted them warmly. Moses was to become her son, raised as royalty. The contrast was stark, a Hebrew child in the halls of Pharaoh. The ordeal tested the very core of Jochebed's faith. Have you faced trials that demand everything you have to give? The crucible of faith often involves relinquishing control completely. Yet, Jochebed trusted in the architect who had brought them this far. As she bid farewell, she whispered words of identity into Moses' ear. "Remember who you are, and remember Yahweh." Seeds planted in his heart would one day bear fruit. The ordeal was not just about loss, but about laying a foundation for destiny. Walking away, tears streamed down her face, but peace settled in her spirit. She had done all she could. The rest was in God's hands. The ordeal had been endured, and her faith remained unshaken. In life's deepest valleys, we discover strengths we didn't know we had. The Lord sustains us in ways beyond comprehension. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil. Psalm 23:4. Jochebed's journey embodied this truth. The ordeal marked a turning point. The path ahead was unknown, but the architect was still at work, drafting the next chapters of their story. Moses grew within the palace walls, educated in all the wisdom of the Egyptians. Yet the echoes of his mother's teachings resonated within him. The reward of Jochebed's faith was unfolding, though she couldn't see it firsthand. Isn't it comforting to know that our investments of love and faith often yield dividends beyond our sight? The seed sown in Moses' early years anchored his identity. God's plan was germinating within him. He observed the injustices inflicted upon his people. The Hebrew blood in his veins stirred compassion and righteous anger. The duality of his upbringing positioned him uniquely. The reward of God's intricate design was taking shape. One day, Moses would become the deliverer of Israel. The reward wasn't just personal, it was generational. Jochebed's sacrifices contributed to a legacy that would impact countless lives. Her story intertwined with God's greater narrative. Do we realize how our acts of faith can ripple through history? And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him. Romans 8:28. The reward is often more expansive than we imagine. Moses' journey was just beginning, but the foundation laid by his family was critical. The reward was not material wealth, but a purpose aligned with divine destiny. The architect's blueprint was flawless. For Jochebed, the knowledge that her son lived and thrived was enough. Her heart trusted that God would fulfill his promises. The reward of peace and fulfillment settled within her soul. The stage was set for monumental events. The reward of faith, though sometimes delayed, is always faithful. The journey continued, each step orchestrated by the one who sees the end from the beginning. Though separated by distance, the connection between Moses and his people remained. The road back to his roots was paved with experiences that shaped his character. The palace could not erase the imprint of his heritage. Have you ever felt a pull towards something deeper, a calling that won't be silenced? Moses began to grapple with his identity. The comforts of Egypt clashed with the suffering of the Hebrews. The road back was beckoning. An incident ignited a turning point. Witnessing an Egyptian beating a Hebrew slave, Moses intervened, resulting in the Egyptian's death. Fear and confusion engulfed him. The road back was fraught with unexpected challenges. He fled to Midian, leaving behind the life he knew. It seemed like a detour, but it was part of the architect's plan. In the wilderness, Moses would encounter God in ways that would redefine his purpose. Isn't it intriguing how our lowest moments can be precursors to our greatest revelations? The road back often leads us through uncharted territories, yet God uses these seasons to refine and prepare us. In Midian, Moses became a shepherd, a far cry from a prince. But in the solitude, he learned humility, resilience, and dependence on God. The road back was transformative. Meanwhile, the cries of the Israelites reached heaven. God remembered his covenant. The stage was set for Moses to return, not as a prince or a fugitive, but as a deliverer. The road back was aligning with destiny. Our journeys may take unexpected turns, but with God, no experience is wasted. The Lord will fulfill his purpose for me. Psalm 138:8. Moses' path was weaving into the grand tapestry of redemption. The road back was not a regression, but a progression toward the fulfillment of God's promises. The journey was coming full circle. In a sacred encounter at the burning bush, God called Moses by name. "I am who I am," declared the Lord. Exodus 3:14. Moses received his commission to lead the Israelites out of bondage. The resurrection of purpose ignited within him. Have you encountered moments where your calling comes unmistakably clear? The resurrection phase breathes life into dormant dreams. Moses grappled with doubts, but God's assurance empowered him. Armed with signs and wonders, he returned to Egypt. Confronting Pharaoh was daunting, but Moses was transformed. The resurrection wasn't just personal, it was a catalyst for a nation's deliverance. The plagues unfolded, each a testament to God's supremacy. Moses stood firm, a conduit of divine power. The resurrection of his identity as both Hebrew and leader was evident. The journey had reached a pivotal point. Isn't it profound how God equips us for the tasks he assigns? I can do all this through him who gives me strength. Philippians 4:13. Moses embodied this truth as he faced insurmountable odds. The Passover marked a defining moment. The blood of the lamb protected the Israelites, a foreshadowing of redemption to come. The resurrection theme echoed, pointing toward a greater salvation. As the Israelites marched toward freedom, Moses led them through the Red Sea, a miraculous passage from death to life. The resurrection was not just his but theirs, a collective rebirth as God's chosen people. The journey showcased God's power to restore, redeem, and resurrect purposes thought lost. Moses' story became a beacon of hope for generations. The architect's design was flawless. The resurrection phase culminated in liberation, but the journey of faith continued. There were more lessons to learn, more trust to build. Standing on the far side of the Red Sea, Moses gazed upon a free people. The elixir he brought back was more than physical liberation. It was the knowledge of God's faithfulness. The journey had equipped him with wisdom to lead. Have you considered what treasures you've gained from your own journeys? The return with the elixir signifies the sharing of hard-earned insights. Moses became not just a leader, but a lawgiver, guiding the people toward covenant living. He ascended Mount Sinai, receiving the 10 Commandments. The elixir included divine principles to shape a nation. The architect provided a blueprint for society, worship, and relationship with God. The people's journey mirrored Moses' own, a series of challenges, failures, and restorations. The elixir was an ongoing application of trust and obedience. It was the sustenance for the road ahead. Isn't life a continuous cycle of learning and growing? We, too, are called to share our elixirs, the wisdom gleaned from our experiences, to bless others. Freely you have received, freely give. Matthew 10:8. Moses' legacy extended beyond his lifetime. The laws, stories, and traditions he imparted became the foundation of faith for countless generations. The elixir was a gift that kept on giving. As the journey reached its earthly conclusion for Moses, he glimpsed the promised land from afar. His life's work was a testament to what God can do with a surrendered heart. The architect's masterpiece was evident. We are invited to reflect on our own stories. What elixirs do we carry? How can we, like Moses, impact others through what we've learned? The journey continues, and the architect is still at work. The story of Moses resonates deeply within our hearts, a testament to faith, courage, and the relentless love of a mother willing to risk everything for her child. Can you feel the weight of Jochebed's anguish as she placed her precious son into the uncertain currents of the Nile? Her tears mingled with the water, each drop a prayer for his safety. Imagine the pounding heart of Miriam as she watched from the reeds, torn between fear and hope. The tension of that moment is palpable, a sister's silent vigil over her brother's fate. Then, the unexpected happens. The compassion of Pharaoh's daughter breaks through barriers of culture and decree. Her decision to save the child defies all expectations, a divine touch softening a hardened world. This isn't just an ancient tale, it's a mirror reflecting our own struggles and hopes. How often do we find ourselves in situations where the outcome is beyond our control, where all we can do is release our grip and trust that God is holding us? Jochebed's story invites us to embrace that vulnerable trust, to believe that surrendering to God's plan can lead to unimaginable blessings. Think about the times you've stood on the brink of despair, only to find a path illuminated before you. The same God who watched over Moses watches over you. He sees your tears, hears your prayers, and knows the depths of your heart. His presence turns fear into courage, uncertainty into faith. Moses' journey from the river to the palace, and eventually to leading a nation to freedom, reminds us that our beginnings do not define our destinies. God can use anyone, regardless of their past, their fears, or their limitations, to accomplish great things. He is writing a story with your life, filled with purpose and meaning. Let this story stir your soul. Feel the connection to these individuals who, like us, navigated fear, uncertainty, and hope. Allow their experiences to inspire you to trust more deeply, to love more fully, and to step boldly into the plans God has for you. As you face your own Nile rivers, those daunting challenges that seem insurmountable, remember that you are not alone. The Creator of the universe walks beside you, orchestrating details in ways you can't imagine. Will you trust Him with your story? Cast all your anxiety on Him because He cares for you. 1 Peter 5:7. Embrace the truth that His love is unwavering, His faithfulness unending. Let your heart find rest in the knowledge that He is the architect of your destiny, and His plans for you are good.